Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is your latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Lock in to all of what's happened over the past few days in the world of sports with a full perspective from the lens of yours truly, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast. Your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And after a 48-hour window of just crazy, wild, unpredictable, whether it be in the college circuit, which I'll get to, or even more importantly in the NFL, it finally had a weekend where it had awoken, especially when it comes to the pro circuit, because as I've talked about here over the last few weeks, the NFL has really gotten a bit, dare I say, stale. Just from the standpoint of we've seen how the first half unfolded. If you listened to last week, as I chronicled the first half, where you had a lot of those teams under 500, and even though there are a couple of teams on the cusp, and maybe things could shift a certain way, and as I looked into my crystal ball for the second half, how we got to wait and see if some developments will take place or take into shape as we get deeper into the season. Obviously, once we get past November into December, and I got news for you, Week 11 certainly put the quote-unquote, not necessarily second half, but put this final stretch to where we're about 55, almost 60% into the season in a good stead, and certainly put themselves maybe in a position to where it could turn around and there could be a lot of interest. And I'm going to hit a few bullet points to discuss and unpack what yesterday meant to maybe a second half that could have some intrigue, some drama, and even some suspense as far as teams trying to get into the playoffs, teams that are falling back to the pack, or teams that may not make it all together. And as we could pretty much detail from year in and year out in any sport, that always could be the case, where you may have that one team that could rise to the occasion or another team that just completely collapses and falls off. And we can't predict that. And that's the beauty of sports, understood. But with the way the NFL season had gone over the first 9-10 weeks, you kind of thought to yourself, all right, we know who the haves and the have-nots are, and the teams in between, are they really going to make a push? Certainly still remains to be seen, but right now it looks like there could be a case for maybe just a little bit of the environment throughout the NFL landscape, that the plates underneath that may shift throughout the entire country and throughout the NFL, that maybe there could be something brewing or something forming here. I'll expound on that starting here with the Eagles. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, JAYREELZ, they're the defending champs. Why are you going to start with them? They've done nothing here in the last 2 weeks. They've only been able to muster up 26 points of offense in the 2 days, or 2 games, I should say, where they were both victorious. The Monday night game against the Packers, and then yesterday in another primetime showdown against the Detroit Lions, which, listen, if you love defense and if you love how a game can be real tooth and nail, and you're going to see some grit, you're going to see some determination, not have a ton of offense, then this was the game for you. This actually brought you back about 50 years in the NFL. But when we take a look at what the Eagles have done, and the Lions I'll get to later on. To me, this isn't about the Lions. Granted that now they fell out of first place, and there's another team in the NFC North that's actually in first place that's not named the Lions or the Packers. So we'll touch on that in a little bit. But for the Eagles, as this very moment, they win ugly. They can even win pretty. They can win a big game, whether it was down in Tampa when they won in the 30s. And no matter what you may get from one week to the next, and it could frustrate the NFL fan to think like, this team could be ripe for the picking. Or, this team isn't as good as advertised despite that they're 8-2. And yes, they are the defending Super Bowl champs. And even though there could be maybe even a faction of that fickle Philly fan base that could look at a game like last night or the game on Monday night and say, our offense is not going to get in sync. Once we get to January, it's going to be a disaster. And here they are, maybe even complaining that at 8-2, if the season ended today, which of course it's a far cry from, but they would have the 1 seed in the conference. But even with all that being said, they're still winning these games. And as Mike Tomlin once upon a time said, style points don't matter. You don't throw back wins. And even though it wasn't a tidy or even a pretty or on top of all that, a rocking chair type game where it was, let's say, 24-10 Philly, where they were able to click a little bit on offense. And yes, their defense was on fire. Obviously, you've seen none of that here over the last few weeks. But they still get the job done. And that's all you could ever ask for. I'm sure there are 25 other teams in the NFL that wish they had the Eagles' problems. So whether that means A.J. Brown not getting touches, as we talked about there on Thursday's podcast, and even though yesterday wasn't stellar, 7 catches, 49 yards, something that you're definitely not going to write home about if you're A.J. Brown. But one more time, you're winning these games. Isn't that the point of you playing, is to win? I get it. You want to have stats. I understand that you want to put up big numbers, just like you talked about there to the press the other day, saying that the offense needs to do their job, so on and so forth. But all that matters is that you win. And that's what they've been able to do. And with the Eagles, it's the beat goes on. Nothing else to add, nothing else to tack on. Now, their defense certainly has taken a couple of big steps, winning the game in Green Bay, as we talked about. And then yesterday, where Jared Goff was just an atrocity. What was he, 14 for 37? Just terrible percentage rate. And the Lions, and even though they have an opportunity, think about this, as bad as it was offensively, they actually should have and could have had an opportunity to maybe, and even though I wouldn't have been sold, because that final call there, where a little bit less than 2 minutes to go, they still had one more timeout, where Jalen Hurts threw that out to the aforementioned A.J. Brown, and it was a pass interference called on Rock Ya-Sin, and what were the officials looking at? An atrocious call. And we've seen some terrible officiating throughout the NFL this year. And to think that the game ended pretty much on that play is a disgrace. But you have to look on the flip side of that. Let's say if that wasn't called and the Lions got the ball, do you mean to tell me they would have gone 70, 75 yards for pay dirt, not for a field goal, for pay dirt, considering that they had just a tough time moving the ball the entire night, especially through the air? So that's why we can look at that game, even for the Lion fan out there, my guy Jay and Fishing Angel there in Clio, Michigan. But for that game to end on that call was terrible. But that didn't mean that even if the Lions had the ball, that they would have just marched on down the field, tied the game, or maybe with Dan Campbell, if they would have got the touchdown, they may have gone for 2 there. Who knows? You know Dan Campbell, he is the riverboat gambler when it comes to making decisions, whether it's 4th down or in a case like that, maybe going for the win. But it's about the Eagles. Again, they still continue to win, no matter how pretty, ugly, and obviously in recent weeks it has been ugly. So they're flying high, and right now have put themselves in good position, considering they got the tiebreaker now with the Lions. Not that that matters, because they have a 2.5 game lead on them, even with the Rams winning yesterday, and I'll get to them in a little bit. But they have the tiebreaker over them, as you know. And right now, everything is running smoothly there in the city of brotherly love as far as the Eagles go. Now, the flip side, when we're talking about the Super Bowl teams from last year, the Chiefs, this is going to be the year where they're probably going to get picked off early. Now, that's not going out on a limb by any stretch. But now they're 5-5. They lost a tough game there in Denver, Mile High, where I'm sure if you're Harrison Butker and the special teams there, after they scored the touchdown to make it 19-13, 19-16, and the extra point was blocked. An enormous extra point, because that meant that the Broncos, all they needed to do was get a field goal to tie, and which they did, and then of course got the winning field goal to ice the game there late. But it was a situation where, as much as the Chiefs needed that game in the worst way, if they had absolutely, positively any shot of winning a division, because as it was, they were 5-4 and the Broncos were 8-2 going into the game, and with the Broncos not having their bye just yet, it was a situation where the Chiefs needed to get that game, and whenever the Broncos have their bye, they would have to get that game in that week too. But if they would have won the game, they would have been that much closer and would have had the head-to-head with the one win in Denver, where the next matchup obviously is going to be in Kansas City. Well, they blew that to smithereens, because that extra point that was blocked was enormous, because we'll never know how that would have shaked down there in that fourth quarter, to where the Broncos got the 54-yard field goal from Will Lutz, and then later on, the 35-yarder to ice it. And the Broncos right now looking like the team in the in the AFC West that is probably going to cruise through a division, considering what the Chargers did, and I'm going to get to them in a minute. But the Broncos right now sitting pretty 9-2, tops in the AFC with the Patriots, who won on Thursday night. No need to unpack that game, as they're both 9-2, and with the Colts having the week off at 8-2, and we'll take a look at the standings afterwards. But the Bronco win pretty much has sealed the fate of the Chiefs, where they, right now, forget about even if they made it to the postseason where they would have to play on the road, which they've never done from game one on. Now remember, 2 years ago, that was the wild card game that they hosted in their building against Miami. Remember the freezing temperatures, the fourth coldest game in NFL history? And then remember, after that, they had to go on the road to Buffalo and to Baltimore before going to a Super Bowl and beating San Francisco. This time around, and right now it's a big if, they do make the playoffs, they're going to have to do it completely on the road. Now, when we look at the big picture, they're on the outside looking in because of Jacksonville and their win against the Chargers. One more time, I will talk about that in a minute. But for the Chiefs, right now, it is looking very, I won't go as far as saying grim, but you can't be too optimistic if you're a Chiefs fan, thinking that this team is going to be an automatic for qualifying in the AFC as far as the playoffs go. Now, chances are they probably will win. They'll find a way. They may go on a little bit of a run here. Who knows? But with still 7 games left, considering they're 5-5, and the schedule, if I pull up the Chiefs schedule right now, let's see. They have as follows. Home to the Colts, well, that's going to be an enormous game. Then at the Cowboys at Thanksgiving. Then they play the Texans at home and the Chargers back-to-back weeks. Followed by the Titans, Broncos at Raiders. Their schedule is not impossible. The Colts, we've talked about it time after time. Are you truly sold on them? And the game is in Kansas City. So to me, that's going to be more on the Colts, although it's going to be on the Chiefs, because if the Colts go in there and win, then you could probably put the Chiefs out on the plank at that point. Because even though Thanksgiving against the Cowboys, pretty much a dead team walking, Texans played a little bit better. Now they're back at 500, but the game is in Kansas City. Chargers, remember, they beat them in Sao Paulo, the opening game, and that's going to be in Kansas City. At the Titans, dead team walking. Broncos, okay, maybe some revenge. And then the Raiders, dead team walking. So their schedule isn't impossible, but that Colt game could be a big one from the standpoint of if they lose that game, could it be a situation where they'll be in a bit of a free fall? That would mean they will lose 3 in a row, and who knows if this team is going to be able to tread water from that point on, despite the schedule being a little bit favorable. So we'll have to keep our eyes on the Chiefs moving forward as maybe a team that I think they'll make the playoffs as of right this second. Let's see in the next couple of weeks, maybe after Thanksgiving, to see where they stand. But right now, it is certainly not looking good for them to not only make the playoffs, but to be a team that's going to be in competition here this year. So we'll have to keep that in mind. And the Broncos, they probably got away with one there because of that extra point, who knows? Now, Bo Nix, the Broncos, you don't really trust their offense, although they were able to move the ball yesterday. But at the same time, I'm not completely sold on the Broncos in a big spot. Yes, there was a big spot and they delivered. In their building, understood. But I still need to see maybe just a little bit more from the Broncos in order for me to really be sold on whether or not they're going to be a team that's going to be at the forefront of an AFC playoff picture where they're going to go deep. They have the defense. Offense, even with Sean Payton at the helm, still the jury's out. That's just yours truly. Now, there's some big-time question marks here that I want to unpack here as far as teams that we thought maybe could take that next step. When you think about the teams in the conference, whether it was before yesterday, a lot of people looked at the Eagles and the Lions, and the Rams too, as the tops in the NFC. And in the AFC, as strange as this may sound, it's going to be Colts, Broncos, Patriots. Who knows what the Chiefs as of right now, even Buffalo for that matter. But when you look at what these two teams in their respective conferences, the Chargers and the Buccaneers. What do you say about the Chargers yesterday? That was an atrocious performance. You cannot go, and I get it, the time zone difference, going west to east, 3 hours, etc. But to lose 35-6 to a Jacksonville team that, let's face it, they are wildly inconsistent. Yeah, 1 week they look like a team, all right, maybe they can compete in the AFC, and then the next week it's like, oh, geez, this team's awful. And they were a complete no-show. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, if you're Justin Herbert, not only do you go back to the drawing board, but you got to say, wait a minute, do we have to blow this thing up? And I'm not talking about the team per se. I'm talking about maybe their offensive philosophy. I understand they're dinged up there a little bit offensively, but still, that was just a deplorable effort there by the Chargers. And all right, you lose a game in Jacksonville, whatever, 27-24. All right, you live with it, you deal with it, whatever. But man, to just be not even show up, that is an eye-opener in my eyes. Because if you're Jim Harbaugh, especially the coach, because that's a guy very meticulous. He's going to be about detail and attention to that. And yes, I understand you can have off days and bad nights, etc. But man, that is one, I get it. You flush the tape, you just burn it. But still, that is not a good sign if you're a Charger fan thinking, and especially if you're going to have to play on the road come January, to have a pathetic performance like that, it's inexcusable. I don't want to hear it. No matter how you slice it, dice it, you can tell me, all right, JAYREELZ, come on. There's always going to be a stinker involved. That was one that, not me. You go to Buffalo, maybe New England. All right, I'll give you that. Jacksonville, come on now. It's the Jaguars. And I understand they're having a good year. They've probably been where they're at right now. They're 6-4. No, I'm not buying. And then if you're the Buccaneers, I get it. That game was back and forth, tooth and nail. Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, both of those guys drafted in the same class. Mayfield number 1, I believe Allen was 7th overall, 2018. And it was mano a mano, back and forth. It was one of those games that looked like it was going to come down to who had the ball last. But as it was, the Bills were able to outlast the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers have now hit the skids here with a little bit of a losing streak. They lost to New England last week, as you know. Now Buffalo, although the schedule will lighten up a little bit in the weeks to come, but I don't know if the Buccaneers are going to have what it takes. Now, to me, it's all on the shoulders of their head coach. We know that they're talented, and I know that they've also been dinged up here over the weeks, the Mike Evanses of the world, the Bucky Irvings. I understand. But still, that was a game that I'm not going to say that they should have won, but they were in there. They were in that game. And if you're the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield, I'm sure you come away with that game knowing that there were opportunities that certainly you weren't able to capitalize on. And even though Josh Allen, too much is riding on him to win these games for the Bills, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the Buccaneers certainly are a question mark, just like the Chargers, as far as teams that you thought would be, hey, maybe dark horses in their respective conferences, because they're going to look at the top teams in each the AFC and NFC, and maybe these are some teams that can make noise. And I'm not going to just base it on this one game or base it on what happened this past weekend. Is it alarming? Yeah, to a certain degree. But this doesn't make or break their season having those type of games. But as far as being a believer, as far as thinking that, all right, I have a little bit of confidence that they could go on the road and win in a hostile environment. We didn't see that with the Chargers. Buccaneers, they hung around and played well until it all fell apart. But those are the two teams that I would certainly be concerned about as far as them making any type of noise as far as going deep into January. Still, plenty of football. I get it. I know, JAYREELZ, stop it. Why are you talking about this here in the middle of November? Let's wait till we get to the latter part of December into January. I understand. But these are teams that have had, unfortunately, reputations of ones not being able to deliver. Now, I understand Tampa won a Super Bowl within the last 4 years, but of course, we know who was that quarterback. And they had Bruce Arians as coach, not Todd Bowles. So you got to factor that into the equation here. Now, right, with still a lot of football to be played, you still have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they could still turn their seasons around and maybe get hot and peak at the right time. But right now, it's not looking too good. So therefore, that's the storyline. And let me say this about the Bills. too much is relying on Josh Allen. He cannot do it all. And that's why I don't think the Bills are going to have a big shelf life come January. Now, let's see how it plays out. I understand they can still get to a conference championship game. Now, chances are they may not see the Chiefs, which could be a good thing for them because they always lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs. But if you're the Bills, we saw what happened in Miami last week where they got nothing from their key playmakers. And Josh Allen is their key playmaker, as you saw there yesterday. 6 total touchdowns, him doing everything. And yeah, once you get to January, he may be able to do that for a quarter, maybe able to do it for a game and a half. But that's not going to be sustainable for 3 games to get to a Super Bowl, especially if they have to go on the road, which right now, that looks like it's going to be the case. So just keep that in mind as we move it along. And then the last thing I want to talk about, as far as just yesterday in the picture, when it comes to what we see here, the Chicago Bears? I picked them as a surprise team this year, but I never thought that after week 11 they'd be in first place. And I understand the schedule gets tricky from here on out. So as much as I could break out the blue and orange pom-poms for them, this could be short-lived. But you got to give it up. They showed some grit. They showed some toughness. They were able to come back late after the Vikings scored that touchdown to make it 17-16. And then here comes Cairo Santos with the game-winning field goal pretty much as time expires. And the Bears, with the Lions losing, as we talked about, and with the Packers, although beat the Giants there and had to come from behind there late in order to win the game. And this is with Jameis Winston at quarterback for the Giants. But the Packers had to survive there at MetLife and win that game. But even that wasn't enough because the Bears, and with first-year coach Ben Johnson, and with Caleb Williams, the quarterback, who is obviously taking his bumps and bruises here in the first year and a half, and certainly did not put up a big offensive game. Threw 50% of his passes, completion that is, 16 for 32, 193 yards. And even though DeAndre Swift got some good numbers on the ground, but still, that was a game that you're just lucky to get out alive. You didn't get swept by the Vikings because you lost to them, remember, early in the season on a Monday night. And obviously that game-winning field goal was helped by the kickoff return there, 56 yards, which helped set it up. And the Bears, right now, I can't remember the last time this late in the season that they were in first place. In fact, let me see if I can look that up real quick. Because when you think of the Bears, the last time in first place, you may have to go back to the 85 Bears. As a team that was in the penthouse of the NFC North. Now, how long that's going to last, that remains to be seen. And if you're going to ask me right now, I can't say they're going to be there for long. They have the Steelers going into their building this week. So we'll talk more about that on Thursday, but kudos to the Bears and what they've done here. And as far as the rest of the games yesterday, I mean, yesterday was probably the best NFL Sunday in a while. And not necessarily just from a matchup standpoint, but just from the overall scale of how the games were played. A lot of close games, a lot of back and forth. And when I take a quick look going through it, now the game in Spain, the first ever NFL game there, I didn't watch. I didn't follow. I know that the Commanders were up 13-6, but just to see that the Dolphins were able to prevail and win 16-13, listen, that's good for Mike McDaniel as far as his job status moving forward. We know that the GM got fired a few weeks ago, but for McDaniel to win that game, trailing, and I get it's Marcus Mariota, not Jaden Daniels, but that's something to build on here toward the end of the year, considering the trades that you made at the deadline, considering that you have a ton of injuries, no Tyreek Hill, that you've certainly underachieved, especially over these last couple of years. And that's one that you can say, all right, they're still an NFL team. I understand that they're the walking wounded. They don't have their best player, but we're able to win a game, and now we fly back home, and now let's see where the chips fall from that point on. Now, they're not going to make the playoffs, so they're not going to do anything as resounding as that, but that was a game that if you did watch, you said, oh, wow, Miami pulled it out. So good for them. Then how about Carolina? Now they're a game over 500. I'm not going to take them seriously just yet, but they win in overtime. I know Michael Penix left with a knee injury, Drake London as well. But how about the game that Bryce Young had? For him, record-setting 442 yards in the air. And what was his percent? I think it was like 30 for 40 or something. Let me just pull that up. 31 for 45, 448 yards, 3 touchdowns, looking like the top draft pick that he was out of Alabama. And a game on the road, they beat the Falcons. And for any fringe playoff hopes that they have, that's an enormous win. You got to beat a team like Atlanta on your schedule in order for people to make you believe that you can win. Because again, there could be the naysayers that said, you beat the Falcons. So what? Yeah, but they would kill that Panther team if they would have lost to them in regulation or in overtime. So it can't go either way. I get it. You only play the teams that are in front of you, and the Falcons are certainly no world beater. But for Bryce Young taking a step, now, does this mean that he's all of a sudden going to take off here for the remainder of the year? I'm not going to say that. But hopefully this is a big building block for him and that head coach. That not to say that every week is going to have to be a 400-plus yard performance, but maybe he'll get in that groove to where, all right, I'm starting to get the thick of things. I'm starting to really play this out where hopefully the 16 for 30, 190 yards and 3 interceptions could be in his rearview mirror. Chances are it's probably not going to happen. I say that, and they'll play their game next week, and it'll be Bryce Young. The glass slipper won't fit, and it'll go back to playing very inept and below average football. But for at least today, you're over 500, and you had a performance that was an all-timer for the third-year quarterback. Then you had the Texans. I understand they beat the Titans. Goes back to what I said about Carolina and Atlanta. You only beat the teams in front of you, and that was a team that if they were going to be of any seriousness to them getting back into the AFC playoff picture, that was a game they had to win. And Davis Mills, this guy's had like a fountain of youth for whatever the reason. CJ Stroud still in the concussion protocol. Davis Mills, who's had his moments as a backup, but he's also had his moments where he hasn't been good. But he has shown that he's been a capable guy to come off the bench and maybe string a couple of starts together to where that they could be a team that's not going to be an automatic win. We saw what happened there against Jacksonville when they were down by 19. They came all the way back thanks to Davis Mills. And then yesterday, another good performance to where they were able to beat the Titans there on the road. And now they're at 5-5 with maybe some outside hopes of making it into the AFC wildcard picture. As I mentioned before, we didn't see this 2 weeks ago. Now, maybe they could be part of the discussion. We talked about Green Bay and the Giants. And Green Bay, that was a big win. They had to come from behind there. Giants were game, showed a lot of fight, but you had enough there, whether you're Jacob. I got names all over the place. Jordan, not Caleb, not Jacob, not Jameis Winston, who did play in the game. Jordan Love, certainly not off the charts as far as his numbers go, but did just enough, and they did had that key touchdown there with about 4:15 to go in the game. 4:02, I might add, which was the game winner, and they tacked on the 2-point conversion just to make it a full touchdown score where the Giants were unable to come back. So that was a big win for Green Bay, but obviously not enough for them to get into first place or back into first place there in the NFC North. Then you had Seattle and LA, where the Rams were able to beat the Seahawks, and Sam Darnold with a terrible performance there, 4 interceptions. And then you had Ernest Jones IV backing up his quarterback, saying that, if you're going to be against my quarterback, then F you. Well, Ernest Jones, come on. That was in a big game, division game. Sole possession in the first place, riding on the line. And he did not deliver. Now, granted that the game itself pretty much came down to the wire because the Rams were in control throughout. And even though that the Seahawks did get a touchdown late to make it interesting, still wasn't enough. But it was a situation where Darnold put you in a position where you had opportunities, including in Ram territory, where you're throwing bad picks. That's not going to look good. You got that guy there to pay $35 million a year to be a guy that's going to deliver in big moments. And we saw that last year when he was with the Vikings in the final game of the season against the Lions, where they needed it to win a division and spit the bit. And then the following week, they had to go on the road where they could have hosted a home game in the wild card round, but they had to go to LA, which was in essence Arizona, due to the wildfires out in California, where Darnold had a performance that was one you certainly do not want to remember. What did he throw? 3 interceptions. I believe he had 5 turnovers in the game. They got blown out 34-9. And in another big-time moment for Sam Darnold, and when he had a storybook year, it ended up going up in smoke. And yesterday, again, for the division, if people want to take you seriously, NFL fans, you got to not have a 4-interception performance. Does it happen? It happens to the best of them. But not in a game where you could have been in first place by your lonesome with a win there at SoFi. And that wasn't the case. San Francisco beat Arizona. Brock Purdy comes back. Actually played very well in the game. And Purdy, as we all know, has had the turtle injuries and just a bunch of maladies throughout this year. 19 for 26. He threw for 3 TDs and 200 yards. So who knows? And even though Mac Jones was admirable in Purdy's absence, but now that you get your quarterback in the mix, who knows? Could this take over San Francisco? We'll see. They still have a bye along the way, and they are 7-4, so they are trailing in the NFC West as of right this very moment. But of course, a lot could change here in the weeks to come. And remember, they did split against the Rams in the regular season, and I got to look at the division record. I still think that I believe they're now 4-1 in the division. Yes, because they beat San Francisco. So I would think if they're going to have tiebreakers, they're going to have to bank it on the division right now, because with the Rams now losing to San Francisco, that's the only division loss I believe they have, and everything else I think is fine. So still a ways to go, but just wanted to replay it off the top of my head to see where those teams stand here as we get into week 12. Baltimore beat up, I don't want to say beat up, too strong, but they beat the Browns. Browns were actually in the game here and had a situation where they had a 13-3 lead. They had a pick 6 there, a terrible pass by Lamar Jackson, and you're thinking to yourself, oh wait, playoffs upset here, or big time upset here? I'm thinking playoffs already. Got to reel it in. I'm a little amped up this morning, people, so that's why I'm all over the place here over these last few minutes, so my apologies ahead of time. But for the Ravens to be in a bit of a trouble, but they got Dylan Gabriel out of the game with a concussion, and therefore Shedeur Sanders made his NFL debut. Nothing impressive, 4 for 16, had a couple of turnovers, didn't play well, which is expected. So I can't kill Shedeur right now, and if anybody's going to get on him, oh, look what he did. No, come on. That's unfair. But the Ravens did just enough. They were able to, when they were trailing 16-10, they were able to get the 2 scores that they needed, including a Mark Andrews touchdown run for 35 yards. So I believe that's what it was. And therefore, the Ravens were able to prevail in Cleveland to beat the Browns and put themselves in a position where they're still 1 game behind the Steelers, because the Steelers yesterday beat the Bengals. It was close there at the half, but then with Aaron Rodgers out, which right now it's diagnosed as maybe a slight break in his wrist, and it's his non-throwing hand. So who knows if he's going to have to play with a protective cast? Who knows the extent? If he's going to have to be out for a game or 2, who knows? But Mason Rudolph filled in admirably for Aaron Rodgers in the second half, where he was 12 for 15, led a couple of touchdown drives, and they went going away. They also had a pick 6 there by Kyle Duggar, which sealed the game there late in the third quarter. They also had a fumble recovery there late by James Pierre, which iced the game. And the Bengals, you could put them out the pasture. I know the big story in the game was the Jamar Chase spitting at Jalen Ramsey to where Ramsey got ejected, and he spit on him. I mean, unless that was superimposed or photoshopped or whatever AI production that was. And despite the fact that Jamar Chase in the postgame said, I didn't spit on anybody, and which was nonsense. I mean, based on what you saw there, he did. And Jalen Ramsey obviously swung at him and grabbed him by the face mask and was thrown out. And even Ramsey was adamant saying, he spit at me, and that's what it was. So the Steelers keep themselves a game ahead in the standings over the Ravens at this present moment. But that is your NFL there, which was a very good one. Now, tonight, you might as well watch a movie, Dallas at Las Vegas. And I don't want to hear what the Dallas has an outside shot in the hunt for. No. Negative. Don't even buy on that if you're listening to Buck and Aitman tonight on ABC, ESPN. And you had Indianapolis and New Orleans were your teams that had buys this week. And besides that, that is your NFL. Now, a couple of interesting, I can't even say interesting, some very sober news off the field. You had that situation regarding the Jet cornerback Chris Boyd, who has been on injury reserve, but was out Saturday night at a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, and because of an altercation with somebody, turned violent to where he actually got shot in the abdomen, rushed to the hospital, critical but stable condition. I think right now he should be able to come out of it, but just a bad story no matter how you slice it. It happened late 2 a.m. Remember the Jets, although he hasn't played, but the Jets had the game on Thursday night. So obviously the Jets in essence were off. But for Chris Boyd, the corner, hopefully he comes out of it fine. We think that's going to be the case. But still in that critical, stable, but hopefully he'll be able to come out of it soon and all will be fine with him. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Boyd family, Jets, NFL, etc. And then you had a sad note where former All-Pro there, Seattle Seahawks, dating back to the 80s, hard-hitting safety Kenny Easley, who died on Friday at the age of 66, made it into the Hall of Fame not too long ago. Very good player, all-decade team in the 80s, Seahawk team, as you know. And I believe he had a kidney transplant. It was nondescript as far as the details of his death, but just terrible to hear at 66. So many deaths that have happened here, whether it be in the NFL, NBA, even NHL for that matter, all the goaltenders that have passed away, the Bernie Perrons, Ken Dryden's, Ed Jockerman, etc. But that's what you have there with the NFL. So thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Easy family, Seahawks, NFL. Just terrible news there as he transitions at the age of 66. And now to keep it where it's at, but this time to go through the college circuit. And man, Saturday was just a wild day no matter how you cut it. Starting off with the early game. I know Notre Dame beat Pittsburgh. Nothing else to really get into there as Notre Dame is still in good stead there as far as the playoff picture goes. But for Texas A&M to be down 30-3 at the half, and you thought to yourself, wait a minute. Is there any way, shape, or form that the Aggies are going to come back in this game and make it a game there into the fourth quarter to where you're going to see South Carolina and the Gamecocks hang on for dear life? Well, right out of the gate, 3 touchdowns there in the third quarter. And they tacked a touchdown there early fourth, or around 10 minutes to go, and then were able to win the biggest comeback in school's history, 27 points, and they win by 31-30 there on Saturday. And A&M, they're still right there in the thick of things as far as getting that bye in the opening week. And, man, that was one that when I saw 30-3 at the half, I said, ooh, I don't know. Watch them make it a game, but they'll end up falling short. Not at all. South Carolina couldn't muster up anything in the second half. Just a bad job by them, but you got to give Texas A&M, their credit for coming back and playing like the number 3 team in the nation. And kudos to them as far as what they did. So that is game number 1. Game number 2, which to me was the more impressive thing of the day, was Oklahoma and their defense going into Alabama and winning 23-21, including that 4th down stop to cement the game at that point. Now remember, their offense did not click. John Mateer was not running around like he normally has, but they had 3 turnovers, which they culminated in 17 points off of those turnovers there by the Crimson Tide. And again, even though they took the lead there at 23-21, but they had to thwart that offense there down the stretch, in which they did. Hung on to survive, which would knock Alabama out of the running to have that bye in the first round. In fact, they're now 10th, to where Oklahoma, I believe, went up as high as 5. I'll look at that in a moment. But the Sooner defense showed up big time to do whatever they could to throttle that Alabama offense. And even Ty Simpson, the quarterback, did not have a big game. And obviously the turnovers hurt, which were huge considering the 17 points, as I mentioned, that were scored off of those turnovers. But for the Sooners, an enormous win. Probably the biggest win in college football this year when you think about it. Of course, this deep in the season, Oklahoma, which at first you may not have taken seriously considering that they were, well, I should say they were. That Oklahoma going into this game, a lot of people thought that they were going to come out of it alive considering the way that Alabama has played this year and knowing that the Crimson Tide, with big wins this year on their ledger, beating Vandy, beating Georgia, teams like that, and here it was for Oklahoma to go in there and beat them. I mean, listen, that is as big of a win as you're going to see in college football this year and certainly up until this point. So hats off to what they did there. And then the night game with Texas and Georgia. Now, the game was close. It was tooth and nail. You got to the fourth quarter, 14-10. That one drive there where Gunnar Stockton had to convert 2 4th downs, one real risky on a 4th and 1 there in their own territory. But they felt like in order for them to win this game, they had to be aggressive, and Kirby Smart definitely did do so. So to convert on 2 of those 4th downs and then get that touchdown at 21-10, and that just opened up the floodgates. Now, Arch Manning did not have a bad game, but certainly didn't will his team or didn't have the effect to where we would think Arch Manning was going to have at the start of this year as one that's going to lead his team to victory. Now, he has had his moments this year, but he's also had his moments where he hasn't delivered and has not played well. And this was one point at 21-10 where you were hoping that he was going to uplift his team, try to get them at least to within maybe even a field goal, considering it was 21-10. If they got the touchdown, 2-point conversion, they would have been down by a field goal. But from that point on, after the Bulldogs took the 21-10 lead, and that was it. It was almost as if they went by them standing still, as I take a look at here. And Gunnar Stockton had a big game, as I discussed, especially in that fourth quarter where they scored the 21 points, which pretty much just left the Longhorns there as if they were standing still. But they were unable to do anything after those touchdowns. It was just a flat-out disaster. They couldn't muster up anything. Even the one drive that they had was a turnover on downs, but that was toward the end of the game and it was already out of reach. So Texas, they pretty much punted their postseason hopes goodbye with their third loss, and Georgia is looking like a team that could be in the running for a national championship. And if Gunnar Stockton is going to have performances like that, where he was 24-29 with 4 TDs, that is going to go a long way for them to maybe having that big late January into December and getting themselves in position to go back to a national championship and win. But as far as the rankings overall, let me pull that up real quick. The top 3 are the same: Ohio State, Indiana, A&M. Now you have Georgia going up into the 4th seed, which right now looks like they could get a bye. Then you have Ole Miss, Oregon, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Alabama. They round out your top 10. Then you have BYU and Vanderbilt round out the top 12 if they do factor them in. Now, of course, you're going to have one of those teams that aren't from the Power 2 out of the quality of the top 5 in those conferences. So you're going to have one of those teams that are going to get one of those spots. So you're going to have to keep that in mind. And right now, that could be a bunch of teams. So without even getting into that at the moment, I'll talk more about that on Thursday. But for the Utahs, the Miamis, even the Georgia Techs of the world, they still have work to do. Now with Vandy, Utah, Miami, one more loss, they'll be done. Georgia Tech, you would think that could possibly, if they move up and some teams fall back, that they could get the generation or the generosity of the committee to get them into the Final 12. Excuse me, my nose is itching. I don't know why. But no, and I do not have a drug habit, just in case people are going to speculate. So for, if anything, sports are my drug. But for the college football, I talked about it on Thursday, a little bit more intriguing than the NFL going into the weekend. But the NFL obviously lived up to its billing. College certainly has done so as well. We'll talk more about what the weekend schedule as we get closer to the end of the season with the college football as we move it along here. But very intriguing and a lot of competitive games down to the wire, defense, just fantastic football overall as we move it along here to the final couple of weeks of the college football season. And I think that's pretty much it for college football. Yeah, that's what you have there with the games, etc. Now, let me turn my attention to what is happening in the association. You got a few things percolating there. And the first thing, I don't really want to get too crazy about this just yet. And I understand there's going to be some people out there, they're going to raise their antenna, their eyebrows, etc., to say, what is happening in LA with this gambling scandal? Is there any carryover or tie into the Terry Rozier's? Forget about the Chauncey Billups, because that was more coach and that was outside of the court. But now the Lakers are being investigated, and that's all it is. There haven't been any accusations. There hasn't been anything of the sort where you'd be alarmed if there has been any wrongdoing or any allegations in regards to what the Lakers have done. And Damon Jones is the other guy involved in this as well. But the Lakers and multiple teams as well. Of course, the Lakers are the Lakers, so they're going to be highlighted here big time. You have an assistant trainer and an exec that have been in question and have been contacted to see what has gone on behind the scenes in regards to the gambling, whether it has been tied into Terry Rozier or even Damon Jones for that matter. And because of the two people that are in question now with the Lakers, the Mike Mancias of the world and Randy Mims, they are close cohorts to a one LeBron James. So right away, people are going to think, does LeBron have blood on his hands when it comes to gambling or things of that nature? Now, if you have not followed this man's career for the last 23 years, other than the decision, everything he's done has been calculated. And yes, he does love the NFL, and I don't know if he places any wagers. I'm not going to allege or assume that by any means. But whether or not he does, that's his business. And if he does it away from the facility, away from the court, then fine. But now with these names being brought up and everybody wants to assume that LeBron is in on this, way too early to tell, way too early to even speculate or even insinuate that he is guilty as charged. So I'm not going to go there either. Let's see what's going to happen here, whether it's the Lakers and trying to find out more information, or just like I see in this article that multiple teams have been contacted by investigators. So there could be another big team that's out there that maybe not be the Lakers, but could it be the Bulls? Yeah, I must have something itchy. I mean, listen, if you're watching, my apologies. But I can promise you, it is not anything that's performance enhancing or anything that's drug related. That I can tell you as I'm on the subject of this scandal here. So let's see what's going to happen. Let's see what will be revealed over time. I'm not going to be quick to judge. I'm not going to be, Lakers got something brewing. No. Let's see how this is all going to shake down, and then I'll give you an even fairer assessment and better critique than just what I've read here, that all that's gone on here is that the feds have contacted multiple teams, including the Lakers and a couple of those guys there, to gather information to see where that stands here in the days and weeks to come. So that's number one. The other thing I want to discuss is the NBA Cup. Is anybody into that? You know I'm not, if you listened to me over the last 2 years. So I haven't really followed it, been on top of it. I know it started early last week. I believe early last week. So that's what you have with the NBA Cup as that moves along. And I know they have their championship in the early part of December. So you got that. Then you have a firing already, coach in the league, where Willie Green, the 2-10 start by the Pelicans. I know that the scenario regarding Zion Williamson, which has just been a flat-out, just raging disappointment. 2-10 record, canned, where you have James Borrego, who was the former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets many years ago. He's in the interim at this very moment. So, unfortunately, Green, who has gotten praised throughout the league, has been a good guy, very good coach, had that first-round series against Phoenix, if you remember, years ago, where he was very competitive, and it was a situation where he got let go because the Hornets are the Hornets. But let's see how he does here in the Crescent City as far as the Pelicans trying to do anything with or without Zion Williamson, because, that has just been a flat-out disaster. And then Anthony Davis out another 7-10 days. No surprise there, as we know that the Mavericks have certainly been flailing here at the start of this year. And one thing I didn't mention, and my apologies to the family, middle of last week, you had Michael Ray Richardson, the one-time Knick guard, net, and also a Golden State Warrior, died at the age of 70, I believe, to prostate cancer. And this was a guy, as a boy, I remembered vividly. Had that quickness, was great defensively, a guy that would attack the hoop, not a bad shooter. And mind you, this is before the days of the three-point shot being prevalent the way it is today. But at 6'5", a lot of people thought he was Magic Johnson before Magic, and he came out the year before Magic did in 78-79 out of the University of Montana. And unfortunately, his demons got the best of him. Drugs, cocaine, and had a lifetime ban there in 1986 where 3 strikes you're out. And he was a guy that had Hall of Fame talent, and I think if he was clean, would have been a Hall of Famer, because he was a guy that scored, could pass, could defend, led the league in steals a couple of times, I believe. But for Richardson to succumb to prostate, just terrible. I mean, what more can you say about that? Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Richardson family, Knicks, Nets, Warriors, and the whole NBA family, losing a guy like that. Despite the fact that he had his demons and certainly had a lot of trials and tribulations, and he cleaned up his life, coached, did well. He was at a lot of Oklahoma City games there last year, watched the championship run, and just a terrible story. I mean, I don't know what else to add to that other than may he rest in peace, 201 Michael Ray Richardson. And as I take a look at these standings real quick, I know the Pistons are still hot as a pistol. They've won now, 8 in a row? They're now 11-2. As I pull up the standings, tops in the Eastern Conference. The Thunder keep on rolling, 13-1. They've won 5 in a row, but the Nuggets have won 7 in a row, and they're right behind them in the standings. A game and a loss at 10-2. Rockets have played well. Lakers are 10-4. What else? Western Conference. Clippers underachieving. Wonder about Tyronn Lue. I don't think Steve Ballmer will fire him, but that's not the start that the Clippers wanted, I can tell you that. Break up the Nets as they beat the Wizards. I know, big whoop. Both the Wizards and Pacers combined 2-24, and the Wizards have lost 11 in a row, where the Pacers have lost 7 in a row. But in the East, it's Pistons, then Knicks, Cavs, and the Knicks have played pretty well here. Hawks, Raptors, and yeah, Bucks, Heat. Yeah, round out, and the Celtics got themselves back as they beat the Clippers yesterday, as they're now the 10th seed in the conference. But that's what we have with the basketball. The schedule this week, tonight, Milwaukee at Cleveland. That's on Peacock. Indiana, Detroit. Clippers in Philadelphia. Knicks in Miami. Charlotte, Toronto. Dallas, Minnesota. Good game there. Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Chicago, Denver. You got good games on the docket tonight. Hopefully you get to watch, especially with that Monday night game. Ugh. No thanks. Golden State at Orlando tomorrow. Boston at Brooklyn. Detroit, Atlanta, Memphis, San Antonio, Utah, LA, Phoenix, Portland. And then Wednesday, Houston, Cleveland. Good game, ESPN. In fact, Memphis, San Antonio, Phoenix, Portland on Tuesday night are NBC Peacock games. And then Wednesday, Houston, Cleveland. Charlotte, Indiana, Toronto at Philly, Golden State at Miami, Washington, Minnesota, Denver, New Orleans, Sacramento, OKC, New York, Dallas, Chicago at Portland. That rounds out your NBA. As far as the NHL goes, not much. Even over these last few weeks, really you have a lot of injuries that have been at the forefront here. And a couple of signings. You had Jack Hughes is going to be out 8 weeks after getting surgery on a finger where at a team dinner, he cut himself on some glass. Now, I don't know what finger was affected. I don't know how deep. Obviously, he's going to have to heal here. Terrible story as the Devils are still riding high there in the Metropolitan Division. But between Charlie McAvoy, the defenseman of the Bruins, took a puck to the mouth, lost teeth. I'm sure he's going to be out. Maybe not for a long period of time, but probably with a long visor. Tough break there. Then you also have the Canadiens. They're going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with Kirby Dach. And he's a guy that is a forward, can certainly contribute to a team that has played well this year to start off their season. And that's going to be a big loss for the Canadiens. As I look at here, he had 7 points in the 15 games. He had one shot on goal. That was in Saturday's loss to the Bruins. But, yeah, as far as Doc goes, yeah, that's just a tough loss, especially if you're a Canadian team that's just trying to find their way there in the East. And let's see, there's a fight here. Look at this. Oh, Zadorov, and that was, whatchamacallit? Yeah, what was the, it's fine. Right off the face-off, too. Boston, Montreal. It kind of brings you back to the old days as I'm watching this highlight here as I'm recording this. So anyway, that's what you have on the injury front. I know you had a signing there. Adrian Kempe signed an 8-year deal with the Kings. So that's a move that they had to make. Good for them. Other than that, I know you had a situation where now Rangers coach is out due to personal matters. Mike Sullivan, you have David Quinn manning the boards there in his absence. That's the same David Quinn who was the coach of the team from 2022 to 24, I believe. This was after. No, that was after Gerard Gallant, or maybe Gallant was before that. But anyway, you have him going to be out for maybe an indefinite amount of time. Rasmus Dahlin, as we talked about, rejoins the Sabres after leaving for his fiancée, having an issue recovering from a heart transplant. So thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to her. But yeah, besides that, that is it in the National Hockey League. You don't really have a ton to sneeze at here, and I wish that was not the case. I wish it was a thing where we could unpack scenarios, certain games, things of that nature. But with the season just about at the quarter pole, I know the Bruins have played 20 games. You have some teams that have played 18. By the time you get to Thursday's pod, you probably have a lot of teams that already have played 20 and have it in their back pocket. But here's what we got. Bruins 12-8 first place as they've been on a roll here. Now, I know they lost the other day, but I believe they won 7 in a row prior to that game. Yeah, they lost to the Senators. And then, yeah, Canadians. So then they'll go to Carolina here tonight, if I'm not mistaken. No, that's the Bruins. I said Canadians. So anyway, so that's the situation with the Bruins there in the conference, in the division. Red Wings, Montreal, they're all separated by 2 points, as well as the Senators. So that's what's happening there, where the Lightning, Panthers, and Leafs are up the track there. Not too far behind, but at the same time, not as close. Devils without Hughes, a big loss. 2 points ahead of Carolina right now, 3 ahead of the Penguins, who split those 2 games over in Sweden in the international series between them and the Predators. Islanders had a 5-game winning streak before it got snapped. It was 4 games. And Matthew Schaefer continues to impress. 7 goals on the year. Just tremendous by what he's done there. And certainly as the number 1 overall pick of this past year's draft, playing just like that and then some. Out west, Colorado still streaking 6 in a row. Dallas has now won 5 in a row, 4 points behind them in the conference or in the division in the Central. And you can say in the conference because the Kings are in first place now as they flip-flop with Anaheim. 24 points. Anaheim with 23. Same for Seattle. Then you have Vegas, Edmonton, 22. So that is the logjam. You literally have 5 teams gunning after the Kings there for the top spot. And who knows what that division and even that conference is going to shake down to when it's all said and done. So keep an eye on that. And as far as the schedule for this week, Carolina at Boston tonight, as I mentioned. Edmonton at Buffalo. Vancouver at Florida. LA at Washington. Montreal, Columbus, Utah, Anaheim. Then you have tomorrow St. Louis at Toronto, Seattle, Detroit, Jersey at Tampa, New York, Islanders at Dallas, Rangers in Vegas. Then you have Utah, San Jose. Wednesday, Edmonton at Washington as they continue their road trip, which started in Philadelphia, went to Carolina, then Columbus, Buffalo tonight. Then you have Washington on Wednesday before they go to Tampa Thursday. And then Saturday they'll conclude the trip, 7-game trip in Florida in a Stanley Cup rematch. Calgary at Buffalo, Carolina, Minnesota, Boston at Anaheim, Edmonton, Washington. That rounds out your schedule there for a early part of the week there in the National Hockey League. And then lastly, baseball real quick. You had Josh Naylor sign with the winter meetings about 3 weeks from today, I believe, or 3 weeks from yesterday. So you got the winter meetings, Josh Naylor, 5 years, $85 million. All right. They bring in a veteran bat, good bat there to their lineup. I think it was a smart move by them. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks when it comes to free agency, maybe some trades with Major League Baseball. I know once you get to the winter meetings there, December 6th through the 10th in Orlando, you get a little bit better feel, maybe some rumblings, some rumors in regards to players being moved. And then, of course, you had Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge win their MVPs in the AL or NL and AL respectively. 4 for Ohtani, 3 for Judge. I know people can say Cal Raleigh deserved to win considering he was a catcher, switch hitter. But Judge has all the other metrics that the baseball geeks are going to love. And the one thing I was surprised is that Ohtani got all 30 unanimous votes. I thought Schwarber was deserving of a few. Not to be the case. Ohtani all the time as he wins his 4th MVP in 5 years. 2 in the American League. 2 in the National. And he's done it, I believe, 4 of the last 5 years. And Judge 3 of the last 4. Doesn't get any better than that if you're those two guys. By far, the two best players in the sport. But that's it with the baseball. And let me just double check I got everything on the docket here. I know you had an MMA bout a couple nights ago. I think Machakev was the one that won. Unanimous. I think it was unanimously in 5 rounds. But yeah, I didn't really follow because, again, those are guys that I understand are on a lot of people's radar when it comes to MMA, but certainly wasn't on mine. All right, bad job on my part. I probably should have been more attuned to what was going on there, but I didn't take that fight seriously. So that's what you have there with the MMA. And let's see. That'll do it. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of Life Coach Sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review. Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com is the website. The YouTube channel, at JAYREELZ. I implore you people. 764 subscribers, little by little. I want to get to 800, 900, and 1,000 so I can start monetizing. This is my full-time job. That's right. I don't have a part-time. I don't have a side gig. This is it. And I'm trying to generate income doing what it is that I love. So with your help, people, please, 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 just subscribe to the channel. I have plenty more content coming down the pike. Not only shorts content, just detailing what's happening in sports during that day. I have a live stream on Wednesday, 12 noon, right here on YouTube, Eastern Time. I do a podcast pregame, live stream right before the podcast is being recorded every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Then you have the critique videos. You have the podcasts that are going to be put out there. I have some other content, lifestyle, among others, coming through on the channel. So one more time, take a screenshot of that. Send it to me on either Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or on Instagram at JAYREELZ. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, etc., I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals. Because whether you do or do not know, it's what I love to do. In the blood, in the DNA, talking sports since birth. As long as I sit in front of this camera and microphone, I promise no clickbait, no rage bait, true sports talk, no nonsense where you're going to hear the same regurgitated narratives or you're going to see the same headlines elsewhere with the same cast of characters, the same teams, the same owners, all that. This is real, true, unfiltered, unedited sports talk unlike any other. And I don't talk about one sport, 2, 3, I talk about them all. So with that being said, you already know that as long as I'm in front of the camera and microphone, I promise I'll deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.